So good morning, everybody. Thanks. So this is the PPES presentation. 10 past 10 this morning. It's repeated 4 times over the 2 days. So 12:30, 10:10 tomorrow, and 12:30 tomorrow. So today's talk, what I want to do in today's talk is just a number of different things. First of all, introduce myself. I'm the director of the PPES program. My name is Paul O'Grady. I work in the philosophy department. Want to say something about Trinity to you. Welcome you to Trinity College and say a bit about the institution. Introduce you to the program of PPES. So it's a unique program in Ireland, and to say something about the features that are there in that. Talk about the content of the program and the individual subjects, disciplines that go to make it up, and why they might be relevant and interesting to you. Say something about the end of the program. So say you get a degree in it, what might you go on to do, etc. And then say something a little bit about why pick this particular program at TCD. So starting off, just saying something about Trinity. It's an old university. We're nearly 20 years old. It's the oldest in Ireland. We're, by various kind of standards and rankings, we're the premier research university in Ireland. So there are different ways in which this is established, but largely through getting the assessment of other academics throughout the world and employers throughout the world. And the reason why that's relevant to you is that it means that when you get a degree out of here, that's the kind of thing an employer is going to look at. So what's the caliber of the university? What's the status of the university? So whether you're getting employment in Ireland or abroad, the kind of university that you come from, or whether you go on to postgraduate studies, is often something that someone will look at as a significant thing. So as I said, it's got this international recognition part. But the other thing that's really nice about it is that it's a relatively small place. So in a sense here, we're right in the middle of the city centre. We're a city within the city. And say in comparison with some other places, for example, Oxford, which as a university is about the same size, the identity of Oxford is kind of spread out throughout the whole city of Oxford, whereas Trinity is quite centralised, quite enclosed. And one of the really nice things about being here in Trinity is that, well, one minute you're in the university, the next minute you're out in Nassau Street or Grafton Street, and you're part of the city and you're independent of the university. So it's just a very nice place, physically, location-wise, to be. And it's a beautiful place, and that's kind of relevant for the point of view if you're going to spend 4 years looking at it. It's a nice place to be. One of the tourist hits that everybody goes to visit is the Book of Kells and the Long Room Hub. So that's a really nice thing to look at. The kind of relevant bit about that is that the library status of Trinity is unique. We've got a deposit library, so that means that in Ireland and the UK, everything that's published gets deposited in our library. So we've got very, very extensive library holdings. And it means that the resources available to you, whether in terms of physical books, but also in terms of electronic resources, is very, very wide in terms of the kind of things that are made available to you as a student here in the college. So that's just some initial kind of comments about Trinity itself. The PPES degree, it's a new degree program. So this is the first year that we're going to have graduates. We began 4 years ago, three and a half years ago. This year will be the first cohort coming out to graduation. In certain respects, it's modeled on a very, very successful degree program that already exists in the UK and Oxford called PPE, which is Philosophy, Politics, Economics. It doesn't have the sociology formally, and although there's sociological elements that come into the degree. And traditionally, this degree in England was regarded as the degree program for politicians or high-flying civil servants. In the old days, it was the degree with which one would run an empire. I think that was how it was kind of initially set up. So that is, with philosophy, you'd be equipped with thinking skills. With politics, you're able to understand kind of the political structures. Economics, you can manage wealth. And then, having had the experience of living in Oxford and the hardship of student life there, you can live in Afghanistan or anywhere you want in terms of the run of the world. That was the old idea behind the PPE. Nowadays, PPE is very much geared towards people who want to understand government, want to understand the social world, the physical world that we live in, and people who see themselves as being involved in shaping the society, whether in politics, whether in public service, or whether in business. So the point of the degree is to equip people with skills, and important, relevant skills that can impact on the way that society is. So 4 disciplines in the program: philosophy, political science, economics, sociology. And the question, who would such a degree appeal to? And when I was thinking about this, putting the points together, So obviously, if you're curious about how societies work and the infrastructure of societies, that's going to interest you. How does government work? How does power operate within the society? How's wealth created? Very topical kind of point. How's it created, disseminated, etc. And also, as part of the PPES, do you want to learn to think critically and be able to articulate your arguments with confidence? Do you have a desire to change the world? Well, all these things are there and are really significant and important. But it kind of just struck me this morning, the 6th point I just added on to the PowerPoint today, that is, do you want to engage with the financial crisis in a skilled way? Because, listen to the news this morning, read the paper. It's just completely full of issues that PPES is completely relevant to. So there are issues about governance. So how is our individual state governed? How does that work? How does our state autonomy relate to a larger whole, so the European Union? What are the implications of treaty change? What kind of values are being traded off in terms of joining such a union versus staying out of such a union? What are the implications for us if we have a two-tier euro system? What are the implications if we stay out of a euro system and say go with sterling? What does that mean for us? Sarkozy today is kind of saying stuff around it's really important to stay in the euro. France's debt will double overnight if they don't. Okay, is that true? How do you figure that out? How do you evaluate it? What kind of skills and tools do you need to be able to figure out is this political spin or is there some substance? Is there some reality behind that? So acquiring those kind of skills is precisely the job of doing a degree such as PPES, because we equip you with a range of quantitative and qualitative skills. So qualitative skills in terms of being able to reason, to argue, to know some of the history, to know some of the infrastructure, the background, to know about value theory, to understand some of the philosophical implications of stuff that's going on. But also hard quantitative skills, so that you can actually begin to analyze markets, understand the probabilistic reasoning that goes on within them, understand the mechanisms by which power, wealth, control are exercised within society, and understand the ways of manipulating them. So ways in which business manipulates, government manipulates, and ways in which control can be in some ways wrested back from these interests. So is there a democratic deficit? So is it the case that ordinary people like you and me have a say in the running of society? Do we hand over power in the forms of government that we have? If we go into a bigger European sphere, do we hand over power there? And how do we weigh the competing values? Is autonomy a really important value that kind of trumps all others? Or do we look at things like solidarity, cohesion, the threat of history, the spectre of great wars in the European scene? Do we sacrifice some level of autonomy to stave off that and hold that kind of thing off? These are all really live questions, and they're really important questions. And they're exactly the kind of things that are grist to the mill for the PPES degree. So, at a glance, the structure of the degree is that in first year you take 4 subjects. So you do each of the 4 disciplines. And then second year, third year, fourth year, you narrow down. So there's a lot of choice in the degree. So in first year, you're pretty much exposed to everything. And then as you discover where your interests lie and where your aptitudes lie, you focus. So second year, you take 3 disciplines. Third year, you take 2 disciplines. And in fourth year, you can opt to major in one. So say you can major in philosophy or in economics, or you can do 2 disciplines to degree level either. So there's a great deal of mobility and choice in the way the program is put together. So what I want to do now is say a little bit more about each of the disciplines, because many of them will be new to you if you're coming directly from secondary level. Philosophy as a discipline, and it's my own one, it's where I work. We train you to argue is one of the main things that's important there. And argument here not being shouting at someone in a pub, but having reasoned argument, reasoned debate, putting forward a rationale or a justification for the account that you're putting forward. Being able to articulate your point of view carefully and thoughtfully. And one of the ways that we do that is by teaching the history of philosophical thought. So in first year we do, one of the philosophy courses is a history of philosophy. So we start off with the Greek philosophers and we move through to the early modern period. In second year philosophy continues that on. to the current contemporary period. Again, interestingly enough, Angela Merkel got a slap early on in the week from Jürgen Habermas. So he's the grand old man of German philosophy at the moment. So Habermas, who's 82, weighs into Merkel, attacking her on her vision of Europe, attacking her on the values that she's incarnating in the way that she's doing things, and sort of challenging the assumptions, challenging the underlying picture that she's taking in the policy decisions that she's making in terms of fiscal union, the role of integration within the society. So just challenging some of the assumptions that are there. And studying philosophy gives you the confidence and the skill to engage in an analytical way with these issues that are important issues, but are also kind of hard to engage with. So we give you a way into moral, political, aesthetic, and religious questions. So in first year philosophy, there's a whole section around arguing about God and religion. So how do we make sense of this? Are there any decent rational arguments for the existence of God? The kind of objections that are put forward, like problem of evil, evolutionary theory, are these significant objections to religious belief, etc.? And to look at what philosophers have said around these issues and acquire the skills to reason your way through that set of stuff. Political science. Well, it's clear that understanding the political system, understanding the different kinds of political systems that exist is going to be really important. So you'll understand how democracy works. Different models of democracy, so different ways in which the democratic structure can be incarnated. How people vote, so there are different systems of voting. On this island there are different systems of voting, so what are the advantages and disadvantages of the different systems? How the party system operates, how parties compete with each other, how parties implement or express different values, or how parties may differ only via historical reasons, and in fact, policy-wise, may not differ from each other at all. How politics operates on a national versus a transnational level. So the relationship between national democracies or national governments, national executives to the European system. So how does that work? How does power operate in that? How does representation operate in that? What exactly is the role of an MEP, for example, versus a TD, and how do you rate the differences between them? And very interestingly then, what are the values behind the different political ideologies that are being put forward? So, for example, do you think that it's really important that individual liberty is prized? And many people think that's a really important thing. So there shouldn't be a nanny state, there shouldn't be a bunch of people telling us what we ought to do. And that clearly is a value, and it's an important value. However, on the other side, you'll have communitarians saying, yeah, but that tends to lead to a very individualized conception of society. It can lead to a selfish society, and it can lead to a society that's kind of Darwinian in the sense that the weak go to the wall and you win by virtue of kind of wealth and power. And in some ways, the European versus the American model is a debate between that kind, so Boston versus Berlin. So say American Republicans have a view on small government, you promote wealth and get the trickle down through society. European Social Democrat system emphasizes much more building infrastructure, taxing, using the tax to put in social services, etc. And then the question about, well, which one works? And what criteria do you use to determine what working means in this particular context? So that's political science. Economics, which is the new kind of cool topic to think about now with celebrity economists. So explores how people in institutions behave and function, producing, exchanging, and using goods and services. But you develop tools to understand issues such as the stuff everybody's talking about. So unemployment. How do you deal with unemployment? How do you promote employment? What about regulation? How does regulation work? What is light touch regulation? Does it really work? What would be heavier touch regulation? What are the downsides of doing such a thing? How does it work in different societies and in different situations? How do you deal with the market power of large firms? So, how do you control Microsoft, for example, or any of the large transnational populations? What are issues, for example, about corporation tax? So Sarkozy makes a speech in Toulon last night, and we get a swipe as part of the thing. So Ireland's corporation tax seems to be back on the agenda. we're using that to promote economic growth in Ireland. We attract transnational companies. France is saying this is unfair competition. Well, is it? Or are there hidden factors in the French system that actually aren't obvious in terms of a rate, but actually make the French thing equally competitive to us? How do you know these things? Well, you study economics and you understand the structure that lies underneath. And also economics is not just about the production of wealth, or it's not just about greed. There are important questions about our common responsibility for the planet. So what's the impact of economics on climate change? Do we impose carbon taxes? Do we make it attractive to do green policy versus unattractive to do not green stuff? And is there a responsibility in terms of the global economy for us to support poor countries? So Ireland has a commitment at the moment of economic support. Many people say in a crisis we should be lowering that. Other people say this is the very time where we should actually be sustaining or even increasing that, insofar as if we're bad, they're a lot worse. So that's economics. And finally, sociology. What happens in society when big changes happen? So we look at social life, social change, and the causes and consequences of human behavior. So I did my leaving cert in '82. So it's almost like a different country, Ireland at this particular point. So in the intervening years, our society has changed dramatically. Attitudes have changed, structures have changed, the law has changed. So attitudes to sexuality, marriage, divorce, contraception, the work, the gamut of stuff. So there's a significant change. And there's splits between generations, which reflects politically in terms of the strength of parties in different places. So in sociology, you understand issues like this. You understand issues about emigration, social movement, issues about minorities, questions about feminism, for example, and the role of women and how that operates within society. So if you're curious about social change and seek to understand that, and particularly the founders of sociology, in fact, were particularly interested in questions about power and how power manifests itself and operates throughout society. So even on something, for example, like health. So we have a lot of discussion in Ireland about health, and some of the issues are about the social determinants of health. So for example, will your postcode determine in some ways how healthy you are? So that is, what's the set of expectations that are within your social stratum, your way of looking at the world? What are the kind of opportunities that you get? And there are physical opportunities, you know, there are infrastructural things that are built into your society, but also there's the opportunity of expectation. Depending on the school you go to, what proportion of people move on to third level versus not? What's the expectation that's put to you versus not? So it's a question of being aware of this stuff, looking at it, and again, understanding the mechanisms that operate and control with it in our society. So those are the disciplines. Those are the kind of things that we will train you in PPES. So I want to talk about the actual course structure of the year. And just fairly simply, there are 6 compulsory modules in first year. So there are 2 philosophy modules, central problems in philosophy and history of philosophy. The central problems one is an analytic approach, so it's not a historical base. So we look at particular problems in philosophy of religion, human identity, ethics, political philosophy, and then history of philosophy is the historical bit. Again, introduction to economics presents the basis of economic theory with maths and stats as an important element going with that as well. Then the introduction to political science and the introduction to sociology. And again, in terms of contact hours, each of these, there are a couple of variations, but mostly it's 2 lectures a week and 1 tutorial. So that's the way this thing tends to work per module. In senior fresh year, you drop one of the disciplines, drop one of the subjects. So you pick 3 from philosophy, political science, economics, sociology. And there's a list of the kind of things that are available. In philosophy, you don't have a choice. So you do the 2 courses that are on offer, more history and logic and philosophy of science. Again, in economics, you move on, intermediate economics with maths and stats. Politics, you have choices among those. Sociology, you have choices among those. So there's a level of choice in senior fresh, both in terms of what discipline you take and within some of the disciplines, there are course choices. Third year, lots of choice. So you go down to 2 disciplines, and they're just all optional courses within the disciplines. So there's a whole range of stuff building on the first 2 years, and depending on your interests, you move on. And then in final year, you can either do one major subject, or you can split your time 30 credits each way between two subjects. In university, a year is equivalent to 60 credits. It's a European convention. So you can either do 60 credits, say, in economics, or you can split 30 credits, 30 philosophy, 30 economics. And the structure of fourth year is also, there's quite a big focus on doing your own work. So typically in fourth year, you'll do a thesis. So that is a major research project that you pick yourself. You work with a staff member as a supervisor for that project, and you work on something that really interests you and produce a substantial piece of work in relation to that. Just examples from my own side of things. People have done theses on the politics or the legitimacy of just war theory, how you make sense about that. People have done theses on the nature of the human person, who've done theses on Buddhism. There's a whole range of stuff that potentially is there that you can do, and equally across the different subjects. So I guess the thing that I'm saying here is that there's an enormous amount of choice available on this stuff. Also in third year, we encourage people to travel. So in third year, there's a possibility of traveling, and not limited to, but including their connections with all these different places. And the point of the credit system is to allow ease of movement. So you do 60 credits at a recognized university abroad if you choose, and you can go and then come back into fourth year with that. And future employment. Well, maybe in 4 years' time, public service is going to be an option there. But there's a range of, things that this course really equips you for. So apart from the obvious one of kind of working within public service, management consulting, journalism, broadcasting, banking, finance, research, ERS research, law, social work, counseling, advertising, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess one of the basic points here is that pretty much most degrees here, from the BA Mod through the best degree, through the PPES, they're not vocational degrees, so they don't train you specifically to walk into a particular job. But the point about the PPES is that it gives you a range of basic tools that open up a whole lot of different things. And the really good thing about the PPES degree is that the tools you're given are both kind of techie, quantitative tools. So you do the maths and stats and the evaluative stuff, but also you do the qualitative work. So you have the sociological, philosophical background to think broadly. And in a competitive labor market, then that makes the students coming out of this program attractive. CEO details. Just one thing to note there, so this is the points for the last few years, so it's high enough point intake. The quota has changed this year, so the quota used to be 25. This year it's gone up to 34, so I guess that will have an impact in terms of CAO. Really hard to tell what, but I would suspect the points may well drop a little bit in terms of the coming year, but it's hard to predict. And just some final comments, not specific to PPES, but about Trinity in general. One thing that's really significant about Trinity education is that you're assigned a tutor. So you could perhaps describe this as a personal tutor. Typically, it's a staff member of the university who's not one of your academic staff members, but you're assigned to someone in a pastoral role. And this tutor, who you hold for the 4 years while you're here, is in a sense your advocate within the system. So it turns out that if there are problems, your tutor is the first point of call. It's a really important thing. It's an important safety net as part of the student experience. And issues around fairly minor things like course choices or discussing exam results, etc., to really significant things that may well happen to people as they go through conflict, bereavement, financial difficulties, needing to take a year out. You've got an advocate and a support whom you can talk to and connect with. So that's something that's really important in the system. And being in university is not just about study, obviously. There's a whole social life. So there's lots of sports centres, lots of clubs, music society, orchestra, theatre society. But importantly, within each of the disciplines as well, there are clubs that are directed towards that. So there's a philosophical society, the political society, where student-run debating societies, study groups, etc. happens. And you make friends. And your college friends will probably last for life. So it's a really important part of the experience. Also unique to Trinity, in second year we have SCHOL, as it's called, the Foundation Scholarship. It's a competitive exam that can be taken. There's no quota on it. But what you need to do is get a first class honours in your exam. So it's a special exam, it's set in January, it's voluntary to do it. But if you get it, you get your commons, that is your evening meal, free for 5 years in college. You get accommodation free, you get a nominal salary, and you get free fees, which is becoming increasingly relevant. So it's a thing that happens in second year, and typically second year students get it. And it's a reward for academic excellence. So it's something that's part of the system. And it's prestigious. So it's something that's really important in terms of the CV. There are other direct entry degree options as well related to these subjects. So, TR 015, PPES is there, but philosophy has a suite of courses. Also in political science, you can do HisPol, PhilPol, there's BES, and there's SocPol. So just there are other options as well as PPES. Other degree options as well, so within philosophy, there's TSM, Phil, etc. Just to be aware of that. So finally, summing up, why do PPES at Trinity? Well, it's the only place you can in Ireland do this particular combination of stuff in this way at the moment. The group is small, and that's significant. There is a group identity among the students as they go through. In terms of the university, it's the caliber of the university with an international reputation. And the other thing that I think is really nice about it is the flexibility of the degree. So you get a lot of choice as you go through to play to your strength and just take choices and take power of your own degree. And that's where it ends up. So hopefully with graduation, and as I said, it's a new program, so our first years will graduate this summer, and we're looking forward to it. Okay, so that's me. We have about 10 minutes for queries, questions, if anybody wants to check anything. So just to say, the stall for PPES is in the exam hall. There's this thing down there, so you can pick up one of those as well, where a lot of this info is kept.